Hello, and welcome to a video for teachers by teachers to be able to help build awareness and potentially share some strategies and some techniques to be able to implement into your classroom tomorrow for dealing with students who potentially may or may not have a diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder. So in the classroom, students with oppositional defiance disorder, they can display defiant and non-cooperative behaviours towards adults and peers, which can be quite hard to manage. And as a teacher, being unprepared for this or unfamiliar with the student in this position can lead to a highly disruptive and stressful classroom. So it's in the name and it's pretty obvious, but traits that we may see and that present quite obviously are defiance, disobedience, anger, irritability. They may find it hard to follow instructions. They may lose their temper if they feel like something isn't going their way. Sometimes it may seem like they annoy their peers on purpose. They find it hard to take responsibility for their actions. They may also refuse to join in group activities and they get out of their seat regularly. Now, this is taken from the New South Wales government and it's a list of pretty obvious traits, but as you can read there, some of them can literally just be a child who's having a bad day. So it's just remembering that repeated displays of these behaviours and sometimes unwarranted displays of these behaviours can be more of a sign that a student may be battling with oppositional defiant disorder. Things that we may not see or things that are kind of more internal that's going on. This again is taken from the New South Wales government page. So for students with ODD, reading, writing, mathematics and concentrating can be really hard. Some can also have language delays and find talking about emotions really difficult. Students with ODD can have trouble communicating and making friends. It is also common for students with ODD to have low self-esteem, and all of these kind of things can kind of tie together and they start to sort of form this identity around their diagnosis, which is something that we obviously want to try and avoid. It can be that your natural instincts when working with these children is to react defensively when they're displaying these behaviours, but it's going to lead to a power struggle, which in the end will not help the situation. So some strategies to consider when working with ODD, especially when we're looking at working them in the space of a year or potentially years. So the first one being a strength-based approach. So we're focusing on communication around the individual's strengths and achievements. So always build on the positives, give the children praise and positive reinforcement when they show flexibility or cooperation. So we're really trying to praise those positive behaviours rather than condemning those negative behaviours. The second one is relationships and communication. So engage in positive and meaningful interactions with pupils, develop trusting relationships and open relationships, especially with key teachers within their team. So this doesn't have to be every teacher, but getting a few key teachers that spend a lot of time with them day to day can be really, really helpful because those trusting and open positive relationships can go a long way in helping not only bring children back to baseline, but helping to sort of navigate those difficult feelings as well. This can help facilitate a more positive learning environment and create a team that can check in on them throughout the day for praise and reassurance when they need it. This is something that does go a long way with them. Another thing is environmental consideration. So just reflecting on the classroom environment and the school environment and identifying any triggers such as noise, flickering or strong lights, smells and other distractions so that you can remove them from the class and from that environment. You may also consider offering a separate workstation or an exit strategy that you've worked out with the student while at baseline. So be able to have that separate working station so that when you identify those triggers that a student may potentially starting to reach outburst, you can sort of offer those alternate tasks or even an exit strategy as discussed there. Now that can't emphasize the importance that exit strategy has to be worked out between yourself and the student while they're at baseline, so that way once they reach those points hit outbursts, we can start to use those exit strategies and call attention to them, and it's more likely that they're going to remember those because they've thought of those when they were in a more calm state. And also it was a collaboration. If you approach them saying, you raise that idea of potentially if you're starting to feel upset, maybe listening to some music and going for a walk, that was your idea, so maybe we should try and act on that. That can be a really handy thing in making sure that it's student-led. It does feel like their idea rather than us telling them what to do. Again, because that directive statement does not really get very far with oppositional defiant disorder. Now, things that you can bring in the classroom today or tomorrow that can really make a huge difference. More movement. So build regular, legitimate movement and learning breaks into each lesson. And yes, that includes office and errand runs. So if you need an errand boy or an errand girl and get them out of the seat, get them moving, get them outside for a little bit of a break from the learning, that can go a really, really long way. It also feels like they're they're contributing to the classroom as well, rather than, again, that identity of defiance. This movement or time outside the classroom serves as a fantastic way to reset, focus, and transition to new activities. The second one is drop the rope. So again, it's just about avoiding that power struggle. So do not engage in a power struggle with the student, because this is just a halt progress, and it's going to lead to further dysregulation or damage to the relationship. So really just drop that rope. Don't engage in that argument, because it's not going to help anyone. This is a great quote actually from a citation that I've listed there, but choose what you will tactically ignore, what's negotiable, and what needs to be reinforced. So it's just talking about those boundaries, what needs to be reinforced, whereas things that you can tactically ignore. And the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is consistency above all else. So ensure that all staff involved work collaboratively, and have clear and consistent expectations, rules, and boundaries. And this should be across the board with all teachers that are working with these students, is that those boundaries and those expectations are the same and very clear. Because if we have one person who isn't really holding up to those standards, then that's when we start to get that blur in communication and that blur in expectation. So with consistency, this is shown to reduce power struggles over time and aid in transition to new classes and teachers. So having that collaboration and passing on this knowledge that we've learned about the student to the next year group, so that we can continue this same progress rather than having to start all over again with a new teacher is the best way, but consistency above all else. So final thoughts: background and insight equals empathy. So remembering that, with these students, potentially they have complex backgrounds, they could have trauma in there. It's a very common trait of ODD. So just remembering that insight and that background to produce a more empathetic approach to students. We don't want to just view this student as the bad kid or the disobedient kid. This student is doing their best just like every other student. It's just their brain works a little bit differently. So building and modeling healthy relationships, boundaries, and learning will lead to the development of lifelong skills. So we're not just helping them build better emotional regulation, better concentration, healthy relationships, all of those things in the classroom. These are actually techniques and tactics that we're passing on to these students to take them through the rest of their life. That one calming technique, that box breath technique, or something that has been passed on to little Timmy that Timmy still uses when he goes to work when he's 30, is a lifelong skill. So we're playing a really important role here. It's crucial that we learn our students and we identify signs of potential outbursts and also triggers to be able to help better intervene and help your students navigate these feelings and their learning. So again, it just really comes down to knowing your students, recognizing those triggers, those points where they're potentially starting to get overwhelmed, whether it's tense fists, whether it's tapping on the desk or swinging or fidgeting. It could be a number of different signs, but just learning our students and identifying those potential signs of outburst and being able to intervene as early as possible is going to be a huge, huge difference. And it's going to mean more to the student as well, because they're not coming to school every day just to get yelled at or to have an outburst. They have a really supportive team behind them to help them learn themselves and learn how to fit into the classroom environment better. But yeah, so that's what I have to pass on to you guys today. I hope you've all found it helpful. Do go to these links that I've provided here. There's a huge amount of information in regards to working with ODD, but hopefully you found this video helpful. And I will see you in the next one.